Now for this stage of the project, we're going to be correcting a variety of images that have got color problems. The first one we'll work on, we'll go to File and Open, is the bust JPEG. Now for each part of this stage, we need to understand how much of the color to correct, and it's a little bit more difficult than just looking at the lights and darks. So to help us out, let's open up our Info panel. We'll go to Window, down to Info. This Info panel will give us the numerical details for the RGB and also CMYK portions of our slider. If we don't see both of these, you can go up to the panel options and you can just make sure that both CMYK and the actual colors are selected as well. With this done, we'll say OK. You don't have to make any changes in mine. Let's choose our color selection tool. This is located underneath your eyedropper tool, and it's called the color sample tool. With this color sample tool, we can click on different areas and actually get samples of what those colors should look like. Let's do a color sample on a highlight area and a midtone area of this bust. The highlight area can be found right here on his shoulder, and with one click, you can see it adds a little point with the number 1. And let's do a midtone area. Good midtone is right about here on his right shoulder. There's the point with number 2. When we look at our info panel, you can also see here's point number 1 and point number 2, and you can see where each of these may be slightly off. If this was a true white, each one of these numbers should be close to about the same. Well, you can see in the highlight field, the blue one is off by the most. In the midtone range, you can see each one of these is about close except again for the blue area. So since this has a yellow cast, the blue is what's being most affected. So to correct this color, let's go up to Image, down to Adjustments, and choose Color Balance. With the color balance sliders, do make sure that preview is turned on. You can see how you can balance out the two different areas. In our case, we want to fix the blue and yellow cast. Let's do it first for the highlights. So select Highlight, and let's click on the yellow slider and move it away from that and up the blue about 25, right about there at the top. With that done, you can start to see it's becoming much more whiter. Let's select our midtone range, and this one doesn't need to be moved up as much. Let's use our yellow slider up right about 10. Right there looks good. When we click back and forth on the preview, you can see there it is before, nice and yellow, but when we turn it back on to make the correction, you can see it turns it much whiter. We'll say OK to that. So now that we're finished with this one, we'll go to File and do Save As. As with the others, let's add the fixed and our name to the end of this one. Choose your format to be a Photoshop file, and we'll hit Save. We can close this one out and move on to the next one. Now let's adjust the gray balance using curves. We'll go to File and Open. Let's find the Plaque JPEG. With this one, I'm going to use my point sampler to click on the white edge of this document. And you can see in here, there's no real cluster of where my RGB values could be. Each one of these needs to be readjusted. And the technique we're going to use will be curves, and this one tends to be a little confusing, so I'll try to step you through it. We'll go to Image and Adjustments, open your Curves panel, and I've placed both of these panels side by side so I can see both my info and the curves adjustments. If you look in your info, we've now got a second set of numbers off to the right of our original set. This second set is how we're going to change it, and it's going to become very important. If we look at our curves panel, you can see we've got a histogram, and the channels are showing all 3 RGB values combined. Let's look at each individual channel. So we'll go to Channels and choose Red, and you can see where the spike in the red channel is happening. To adjust a curve, notice that you've got a red line going through it. Let's make a new point at the 3/4 mark right here. And the amount we need to move or adjust this point is going to depend on the values we have in our info panel. Right now, let's change the input value. The input value, you can see it down here at the very bottom corner. left-hand corner, the input value should be whatever red value you have right now. So it's 233 for hours. So let's change the input to 233. And when this happens, you can see we get an output that makes our image very green. So we need to readjust the output. To do this, look at our green value. Our green value is 220. So let's change the output of our curves to be 220. That readjusts it back up to the red, and you can see our point in our curves is matching right where that spike should be. Let's do the same thing for our blue. So we'll go to Channels, choose Blue. And as with the other one, let's do a point right at the 3/4 mark. It's a little bit difficult to see. We can see our input value for our blue needs to be about 213 or 212. This is again going to shift it kind of towards the green value. So let's type in our green output value to be 220. And that'll bring it back up to there. Let's zoom out. Again, you can click the before and after for the preview. Once you get something that you like, we can say OK. And let's go up to File and Save As. Again, with this one, let's add the name Fixed and your name. And let's change our format to be a Photoshop file and hit Save and close that one out. Now the final thing we'll do is use curves to adjust contrast, and this will be a little bit easier. Let's go to File and Open and locate the Tile JPEG. And again, let's go to Image and Adjustments and bring up our curves. Now this time we didn't have to do any point sampling for this one. Instead, let's work in our RGB channel and just adjust the histogram that we see. First off, you can see that our histogram doesn't have a lot of whites to this area. So we're going to click at this top right-handmost point. And let's drag it in until it matches the base right where it should be. So this is equivalent to moving your light point slider on your histogram or your levels adjustment. Now to further help you with this, you can turn on Show Clipping, and whenever you make this adjustment, you can see on your original image when the image would start to appear. And so when you show clipping, once you start to see pixels just start to form right about here, that's how you know you've got a good sample. I'm going to turn off the Show Clipping. Now let's readjust the actual curvature of our line. I'm going to click at this first 1/4 point, add a point to it. Let's bring down our dark values to darken up the darks. And then we'll click at this top 3/4 point. Let's bring it up to lighten up our lights. And really there's no good set point to do this. Working with curves is really, you're kind of working by eye. But a subtle shift like this is kind of what we're looking for. Once you're done, we can hit OK. Then I can do Command Z and Command Z again to do a before and after to see that particular change. Very subtle, but we're finished with this one. Let's go to File and Save As. And as with the other ones, let's choose our format to be Photoshop. And we'll add Fixed and our name to the end of these. We'll hit Save and close it out. And this will end up stage 3.